Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again to you, Mr. Barr, for being willing to answer all these questions today. I want to continue on some of the same theme that Mr. Blumenthal raised a moment ago. He raised a couple of questions regarding immigration, regarding our asylum process. I think it's significant to note here that we have some in our political discourse today who are suggesting that the enforcement of our immigration laws and the enforcement of our border is somehow immoral, that it's somehow wrong. We've had people who, in one of the major political parties, multiple candidates be elected, campaigning, among other things, on either eviscerating ICE's power or abolishing the agency altogether. As you noted earlier today, you gave a speech back in 1992 in which you were one of the first people I remember using the metaphor of wanting to make sure that our immigrants come to this country through the front door and not through the back door, not through a side window or something to that effect. Can you just sort of describe to us why you think it's important that we draw a clear moral distinction between the enforcement of immigration laws, between legal immigration and illegal immigration? Is this the functional equivalent, in other words, of the premature removal of a do not remove tag on a mattress, or is it something more than that?
I think it's something more. I mean, we have built a great society here in the United States, and a vast majority, and I forgot what the statistic is, but a very large majority of the world lives under our poverty level. And for them, even, being poor in the United States would be a step up. And we have a lot to be grateful and thankful for here. And if it was unrestricted, a lot of people would come here, more than we could possibly accommodate. And
who would that harm first and foremost if we allowed that to happen? Would it be the wealthy who would most immediately be harmed by that?
No, it wouldn't. Yeah. And so it just seems obvious that you have to have a system of rationing. You have to have a system that makes determinations who can come and when. And Congress is in charge of that. They can make the laws and determine it. We, I think, have a very expansive system. There are people waiting in line for 10, 15, at least there were when I last looked at it, in the Philippines, for example, for over a decade, waiting patiently, law-abiding people who want to come here and have family here and other things like that. And just to allow people to come crashing in, be told that if you say this, you'll be treated as an asylum, and then you don't have to reappear for your hearing or whatever. It's just an abuse of the system, and it's unfair. I mean, all of us have been standing in lines, long lines, and someone just walks up to the front. That's unjust. That's unjust. I also think that without control, you have unsafe conditions and uncontrolled conditions on the border, which create serious safety problems for everybody on both sides of the border. So it creates uncontrolled access to the country as a national security threat. There are people around the world that are coming into Latin America for the purpose of coming up through the border. So these are the reasons why I think it's important that we enforce. We have an enforceable system of laws, which right now the laws are sorely lacking.
Our desire to enforce our border is not unique to us. In fact, our neighbors on the southern side of our border in Mexico themselves have pretty strict laws which they enforce. And our neighbors in Mexico, including the officials in the new Lopez Obrador administration with whom I visited recently, are themselves quite concerned about these uncontrolled waves of migration from Guatemala, from Honduras, from El Salvador. It occurs to me, and it has occurred to them, that it's important for us to figure out ways to turn off the magnets that are bringing these uncontrolled waves in. If you could wave a magic wand, is there anything, any change you would make to current asylum law or policy that you think we ought to consider?
I really couldn't say off the top of my head. I think I had some ideas a while back about, I'm talking decades ago, about how we could change it, because this has always been the problem. But I'd have to see exactly where the abuses are coming in and how we could deal with it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I've got one more question. Could I,
Sure, absolutely.
with leave of the chairman, I want to get back very briefly to civil asset forfeiture. I referred briefly at the end of our previous exchange to a process whereby some state law enforcement agencies, seeing that they are prohibited from doing that which they would like to do under state law, will go to a federal law enforcement agency and agree to make the civil asset forfeiture that they want federal, such that it's no longer governed by state law. Sometimes that happens, and the Department of Justice will enter into an equitable sharing arrangement with that state, where the money is sort of, I don't like to use the word laundered, but it's filtered through the federal system deliberately in an effort to circumvent state law. Would banning this type of equitable sharing in civil asset forfeiture be something that you would be willing to do as Attorney General?
No, I couldn't say I'm willing to do it now because I don't know enough about it. I come at this, number one, that asset forfeiture is an important tool. Number two, that it's important, how we work with our state and local partners. But number three, as you could tell from my early statement on this matter, I am sensitive to creating a speed trap problem and also due process issues where amounts are stolen that, for all intents and purposes, it would be too costly for some individuals to go and try to, get back. So I'm open to looking at whether there are abuses, what kind of abuses occur, and try to redress those.
Okay, thank you. And it's my view that at least in that circumstance where it's prohibited by state law enforcement agencies shouldn't be able to make themselves whole. They shouldn't be able to seek the blessing of government simply by making it federal. So I hope you'll consider that and appreciate your remarks on due process. This really does touch on that, and it's right at the surface of a whole lot of constitutional rights. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.